There are plenty of incredible smartphones this year, but the LG G6 and the Samsung Galaxy S8 are probably the two most desirable. Samsung's flagships have typically had better cameras than LG's, but in this video, I'm going to see if that still holds up. The Galaxy S8 comes with a 12 megapixel sensor, an f1.7 26mm lens, phase detect autofocus, and optical image stabilization. And its front-facing camera has an 8 megapixel sensor with an f1.7 autofocus lens. On the other side, we have the G6 with its dual 13 megapixel camera sensors. The main one has an f1.8 71-degree lens with optical image stabilization. The G6's front-facing camera has a 5 megapixel sensor, which is paired with a 100-degree wide-angle lens. But enough with the specs, let's jump in. To capture these shots, both phones were set to their maximum resolution and Auto HDR was switched on, which Samsung and LG both use as the default setting. Right away, you can see that Samsung keeps with tradition with the S8, bumping up saturation to make its images pop. A handful of these shots look a little bit dull, but that has more to do with the clouds than the tuning of the sensors in both phones. Even so, the difference between the G6 and the Galaxy S8 is pretty obvious. You can also see that a few of the G6's shots are slightly out of focus. This seems to happen when switching from taking a macro shot to a regular shot. The phone takes pictures before the autofocus has a chance to adjust. For what it's worth, that hasn't happened yet with the S8. The toned-down pictures of the G6 aren't really as appealing as the S8's, but the lower contrast creates a flatter image, which is typically more suitable if you're looking to edit your pictures later on. The difference in saturation is always a subjective preference, but I do have to highlight the Galaxy S8's sensitivity to light and its dynamic range. With exposure of both these phones pretty close on all of these shots, the S8 pulls in more color and, more importantly, more detail in the clouds. This is even more obvious when you take a picture directly against the sun. The S8's image is bright and full of color, while the G6's is dark to help compensate for the bright light. As for overall image clarity, it's a bit of a toss-up between these two. When you zoom in, both phones are able to capture an incredible amount of detail. This means you can capture a shot from far off and then crop to a tighter shot later on. In this shot, I just wanted to capture the texture of the metal, but I also got a tiny spider that was just hanging out. This here is a video test to check out the optical image stabilization offered by both cameras. And to pick up some of the ambient noise as well. And now switching over to the front-facing camera. And to give you an idea of what the audio is recorded on each of those devices, I'm going to be switching the audio from the LG G6. So this is the audio now from LG smartphone. And now switching over to the Samsung Galaxy S8. The picture on both devices looks pretty good to me from what I can tell just by holding it. But I do see that there's a lot of shake in the Samsung Galaxy S8 as I'm walking down the street with its image stabilization, electronic image stabilization. Not so much with the LG G6. Things get a little bit interesting when you turn down the lights. It's as if the phone's reverse roles, since the G6 bumps up saturation significantly. But Samsung does seem to come out ahead, with better focus times and sharper images. If you're the type who's inclined to take selfies from time to time, you can't go wrong with either device. They both take stunning shots, but they can also be used to show you every last wrinkle and imperfection on your face. Personally, I prefer the G6 and its 100-degree wide-angle lens, since it allows you to cram in more of your friends in every shot. In so many of these pictures, it's hard to identify a clear winner. The sensor that Samsung is using in the Galaxy S8 is clearly better than the one LG chose to stick inside the G6, but it's not that good that it blows the G6's camera out of the water. LG has come a long way since last year. Even though Samsung is still ahead of its main Android competitor, the G6 doesn't have the buffer space that the S7 did last year. So now that you've seen what both cameras can do on these two devices, which one would you rather spend your hard-earned money on? Feel free to fight things out in the comments. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.